Captain Jake Morrison stood at the viewing window of the horizon's edge, watching the lights of Kepler Station grow brighter as his ship approached. 3 years had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council, and Jake still felt a sense of wonder every time he saw the massive station floating in space. It was home to thousands of beings from hundreds of different worlds, all living and working together in peace. "Captain, we'll be docking in 20 minutes, said Lieutenant Amy Brooks from behind him. She was his communications officer, and had been with him since the beginning of their mission. "The diplomatic reception starts in 2 hours. Are you ready?" Jake turned and smiled. "As ready as I'll ever be." "I still hate these formal events," Amy laughed. "You and me both. But orders are orders." The Horizon's Edge was a diplomatic vessel, designed to carry representatives from different species and foster cooperation between humans and their new alien friends. Jake's crew was mixed, with humans working alongside beings that would have seemed impossible just a decade ago. His second officer was a Velthari named Krixtal, an insectoid creature with 6 limbs and compound eyes that saw in spectrums humans couldn't imagine. The ship docked smoothly at Kepler Station, and soon Jake found himself in his dress uniform, walking through the gleaming corridors toward the grand reception hall. Amy walked beside him, and behind them came Krixtal, his chitinous armor polished to a shine for the occasion. "This is a big event tonight," Krixtal said, his voice coming through the translator device at his throat. "Representatives from 12 different worlds will be present. It's an honor for us to attend." Jake nodded. He had learned to read some of Krixtal's body language over the 2 years they had served together. The Velthari was excited, his antennae twitching in the way they did when he was happy. Jake considered Krixtal a friend, though he knew there were still many things about the alien culture he didn't understand. The reception hall was enormous, with a domed ceiling that showed the stars beyond. Beings of all shapes and sizes mingled throughout the room. Jake saw the tall, graceful Luminae, creatures that seemed to be made of living light. Near them stood a group of Thorians, bear-like beings covered in thick fur. In another corner, the aquatic Selkies floated in their mobile water tanks, their melodious voices carrying across the room. "Quite a gathering," Amy said quietly. "I've never seen so many species in one place." A human diplomat approached them, a woman named Patricia Cole who worked directly for Earth's ambassador. "Captain Morrison, so glad you could make it. The ambassador wants to introduce you to some of the delegates. Please, follow me." They spent the next hour moving through the crowd, making introductions and small talk. Jake noticed something he had seen before but never really thought about. The aliens were friendly and polite, but they always maintained a certain distance from the humans. When hands were extended in greeting, the aliens would bow or make their own species-specific gestures, but they never actually touched. He had always assumed it was just cultural differences. Humans shook hands, but why would an insectoid or a being made of light have the same custom? It made sense that everyone had their own ways of greeting. But then something happened that made Jake question everything. Ambassador Lyra of the Lumini was gliding across the room, her form shimmering with soft blue light. She was elegant and beautiful in her own alien way, and she seemed to be heading toward the refreshment area where several humans stood talking. Lyra wasn't watching where she was going, focused instead on something happening across the room. She bumped directly into Amy. The contact lasted less than a second, just the briefest touch of Lyra's luminous form against Amy's arm, but the effect was immediate and dramatic. Lyra jerked backward as if she had been burned, her light flickering rapidly through colors that Jake's translator said indicated extreme distress. Other Luminae nearby rushed to her side, forming a protective circle around her. Amy stood frozen, shocked by the reaction. "I'm so sorry," she called out. "I didn't mean to. Are you all right?" But Lyra and her companions were already moving away, leaving the area quickly. The whole incident had taken perhaps 10 seconds, but Jake noticed that every alien in the immediate vicinity had gone silent. They were all watching, their various forms of expression showing what looked like fear or concern. "What just happened?" Amy asked, turning to Jake with confusion in her eyes. Before Jake could answer, Krixtal appeared at his side. The Velthari's antennae were flat against his head, a sign of distress that Jake had learned to recognize. "We should return to the ship," Krixtal said quietly. "Please, Captain. We should go now." Jake looked at his friend, seeing something in the alien's posture that he had never seen before. Krixtal was afraid. "Not until you tell me what's going on," Jake said firmly. "That was more than just an accident. Lyra reacted like Amy had hurt her. What aren't you telling me? Crystal's mandibles clicked together, a nervous gesture. Around them, other aliens were starting to move away, creating a small bubble of empty space around the humans. It was subtle, but once Jake noticed it, he couldn't unsee it. Throughout the entire reception, the aliens had been maintaining careful distance from every human present. Crystal, Jake said, his voice harder now. We've served together for 2 years. I trust you with my life. I need you to trust me now. What's going on? The Velthari looked around, his compound eyes taking in the room. Then he made a decision. Not here, Captain. But yes, I will tell you. You deserve to know the truth. We all do. They left the reception early, returning to the horizon's edge. Jake called Amy and his chief engineer, Danny Lee, to his ready room. Crystal stood before them, his posture showing his internal struggle. I am about to violate a directive that has stood for nearly 1,000 years, Crystal said slowly, but I cannot serve beside you any longer without you knowing the truth. What directive? Danny asked. He was a practical man, a genius with ship systems, and he looked more curious than worried. Crystal's antennae trembled. There is a law in the Galactic Council. It is classified at the highest level, hidden from humanity when you joined us. The law is simple. No non-human species is permitted to make physical contact with humans except in cases of absolute emergency. The room went silent. Jake felt his stomach drop. What? That's impossible. We've been part of the council for 3 years. Someone would have told us. No, Crystal said sadly. The council decided that humans should not know. They feared how you would react. So instead they told all other species to simply avoid contact and to make it seem like cultural preference. Every alien you have ever met knows this law. It is taught to us from childhood. We are warned about the danger of touching humans. Amy's face had gone pale. Danger? What danger? We're not dangerous, aren't you? Crystal asked, and there was genuine sadness in his synthesized voice. Captain Morrison, I have served with you for 2 years. In my culture, we express friendship through touch. We embrace, we place our limbs on each other's shoulders. We connect physically as well as emotionally. Do you know what it has been like for me to call you my friend? To respect you and care about you, but to never be able to express it in the way my people have done for thousands of generations? Jake felt his throat tighten. He had thought he and Crystal were close, but now he realized there had always been this invisible wall between them. Why? He asked quietly. Why are you barred from touching us? Crystal looked at him with those alien eyes, and Jake saw genuine emotion there, because the last species that touched humans died. All of them. An entire galactic empire gone within a generation, and the council has been terrified of it happening again ever since. Jake Morrison couldn't sleep that night. He lay in his quarters aboard the horizon's edge, staring at the ceiling and thinking about what Crystal had told them. An entire species dead from contact with humans. It seemed impossible, like something from a horror story rather than real history. By morning, he had made a decision. He found Amy and Danny in the mess hall, both looking as tired as he felt. We need to find out the truth, Jake said, sliding into the seat across from them. If what Crystal says is real, there must be records. The council keeps files on everything. We just need to access them. Danny leaned back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful. The council's database is supposed to be open to all member species. But I'm betting this particular information is locked behind some serious security. Can you get past it? Jake asked. Danny grinned. Captain, I can get into anything if you give me enough time. The question is whether you're willing to risk the consequences. We're talking about hacking restricted council files. If we get caught, it's not just our careers. It could be a diplomatic incident. I need to know, Jake said firmly. We all deserve to know why the entire galaxy is afraid to touch us. Amy nodded slowly. I'm in. But we need to be smart about this. If there really is a cover-up, then people in high places want it to stay hidden. We can't leave any traces. Over the next 3 days, Danny worked his magic. He was careful, routing his access through multiple dummy terminals and using security gaps that technically weren't illegal, but definitely weren't encouraged. Jake watched over his shoulder as lines of code scrolled across the screen, meaningless to him but clearly making sense to Danny. Got it, Danny finally said, his voice tight with excitement. There's a classified archive sealed 847 years ago. The access logs show it hasn't been opened in over a century. Whatever's in here, the council really doesn't want anyone looking at it. Open it, Jake said. The file that appeared on the screen was massive. It contained reports, scientific data, military logs, and what looked like testimony from dozens of different species. The title at the top made Jake's blood run cold. The Korath Incident, Final Report and Establishment of the Non-Contact Protocol. Korath, Amy said quietly. I've never heard of them. That's because they don't exist anymore, Jake said, scanning through the introduction. According to this, they were one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. They controlled hundreds of worlds, and then they encountered Earth. The three of them spent the next several hours reading through the files, piecing together a story that seemed too incredible to be true, but the evidence was all there, recorded in meticulous detail. The Korath Empire had been expanding for thousands of years. They were warriors, proud and powerful, with technology that made them nearly unstoppable. Their biology was remarkable as well. They could regenerate from almost any injury, they were immune to most known diseases, and they lived for hundreds of years. They saw themselves as the pinnacle of evolution, the rightful rulers of the galaxy. Years ago, a Korath survey ship had discovered Earth. Humanity was still primitive by galactic standards, barely beginning to understand science and completely unaware that other intelligent life existed. The Korath saw Earth as just another world to add to their empire. They didn't even consider the primitive humans to be a threat. A team of 12 Korath scientists landed in what the records indicated was somewhere in Europe, during what humans called the Renaissance period. They were careful not to reveal themselves broadly, making contact with only a small group of humans in a remote area. They collected samples, made observations, and even had extended conversations with the locals through translation devices. The Korath spent 3 weeks on Earth. Then, they returned to their ship, satisfied with their survey. Earth would be easy to conquer when the Empire was ready, they reported. The humans were fragile, short-lived, and technologically backward. 6 weeks later, all 12 members of the survey team were dead. The medical reports were detailed and disturbing. The Korath had contracted what appeared to be simple bacterial infections. Nothing exotic, nothing that should have been dangerous to beings with their advanced immune systems. But instead of fighting off the infections, the Korath biologists had watched in horror as their bodies failed to mount any effective defense. They tried everything. Advanced medicines, genetic therapies, even placing the infected individuals in complete sterile isolation. Nothing worked. The bacteria spread through their systems, multiplying unchecked. Within weeks, the mighty Korath warriors were dead. The Empire was alarmed, but not yet frightened. They assumed the survey team had been careless, had perhaps been exposed to some rare pathogen. They sent a military quarantine force to Earth, 50 ships carrying thousands of soldiers and scientists. Their mission was to identify the threat and neutralize it. This time, the Korath didn't make direct contact with humans. They studied Earth from orbit, sent down remote probes, and analyzed samples collected by automated systems. They found nothing unusual. Earth's bacteria were ordinary, the kind of simple organisms that existed on thousands of worlds. There was no reason why they should be deadly to Korath biology, but then members of the quarantine force began to get sick. The military logs showed the growing panic. Somehow, despite all their precautions, Earth's microbes had made it onto their ships. Soldiers started dying, then scientists, then even the admirals. The infection spread from ship to ship. Nothing they tried could stop it. In desperation, the Korath commander made a fateful decision. If Earth's life was too dangerous to study safely, then it would have to be sterilized. He ordered a limited orbital bombardment, targeting the areas where the survey team had made contact. The goal was to eliminate the specific human populations and bacteria that had proven so deadly. The bombardment was precise and devastating. Entire communities were wiped out in moments. But then something unexpected happened. The humans fought back. They shouldn't have been able to. They had no spaceships, no advanced weapons, nothing that could threaten an orbital fleet. But in their desperation, they did the only thing they could. They sent up infected individuals, people who were carrying the same diseases that had killed the survey team. They didn't have rockets or missiles, but they had hot air balloons and primitive aircraft. And they released contaminated materials into the atmosphere, where the wind currents would carry them higher. It was a desperate, almost insane plan. But somehow it worked. The Korath ships, already compromised by infection, were hit with a new wave of contamination. The fleet's medical systems collapsed completely. Within days, the remaining ships fled Earth's orbit. But the damage was already done. The Korath who returned home carried the infections with them. Earth's microbes, so harmless to humans, spread through the Korath population like wildfire. The Empire tried quarantines, tried abandoning entire worlds, tried every medical intervention they could imagine. Nothing worked. Within a single generation, the Korath Empire collapsed. Billions died. The survivors were scattered, their civilization destroyed. And they blamed Earth. Jake sat back in his chair, feeling sick. This is insane. A few bacteria did all of this. It gets worse, Amy said, pointing to another section of the report. Look at this. The Council sent their own research teams to study what happened. They found that it wasn't just Earth's bacteria that were dangerous. It was the combination of Earth's incredible microbial diversity and the Korath's biological uniformity. Danny pulled up the scientific analysis. The Korath had engineered themselves over thousands of years. They made themselves stronger, tougher, longer-lived. But in doing so, they eliminated most of their genetic diversity. Their immune systems were optimized for known threats but couldn't adapt to new ones. When they encountered Earth's bacteria, which had evolved in one of the most competitive environments in the galaxy, they had no defense. So we're actually walking biological weapons, Jake said quietly. Every human carries thousands of different species of bacteria, and any one of them could potentially wipe out an alien species that isn't prepared for it. Amy was reading through the final sections of the report. The Galactic Council debated what to do about Earth for years. Some wanted to destroy it, to prevent another Korath incident. Others argued that humanity hadn't done anything wrong, that the Korath had brought their fate on themselves. Eventually they compromised. Earth would be left alone, monitored from a distance but never contacted. And that directive stood for over 800 years. Until we developed spaceflight ourselves, Danny said. And then the Council had a problem. They couldn't ignore us anymore, but they were still terrified of physical contact. So they created this elaborate cover-up. They let us join, but they made sure we never knew the real reason why aliens wouldn't touch us. Jake felt anger building inside him. They lied to us. For 3 years, they've let us believe we were welcome, that we were equals. But the whole time, they've been treating us like we're contaminated, like we're dangerous. We are dangerous, Amy said softly. At least we can be. The report is clear about that. Without proper precautions, human contact could be deadly to species that haven't evolved the right immunities. But with proper precautions? Jake asked. That's the question, isn't it? Jake Morrison requested an urgent meeting with Captain Lisa Grant, the commander of Kepler Station. He didn't explain why over the communication channels, just said it was a matter of extreme importance. Lisa was human, one of the highest-ranking officers in Earth's space fleet, and Jake hoped she would understand what needed to be done. They met in Lisa's private office, a spacious room with windows looking out over the docking bays. Lisa was in her 50s with gray hair and the kind of calm confidence that came from decades of experience. She listened without interrupting as Jake, Amy, and Danny explained what they had discovered. When they finished, Lisa sat in silence for a long moment. Then she sighed deeply. I was wondering when someone would figure it out, she said. Jake felt his stomach drop. You knew? How long have you known? About 5 years, Lisa admitted. I found the same files you did, though I was a bit more subtle about accessing them. I've been trying to figure out what to do with the information ever since. Why didn't you tell anyone? Amy asked, and there was anger in her voice. Because I wasn't sure it would help, Lisa said. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the station beyond. Think about what this information means. If we tell people that aliens are afraid to touch us, that they see us as biological weapons, how do you think humanity will react? They'll be angry, Jake said. They'll feel betrayed. Exactly. And that anger could destroy everything we've built over the last 3 years. The alliance with the Galactic Council is fragile. We're still the newcomers, still trying to prove ourselves. If humanity finds out about this directive and reacts badly, it could give the Council an excuse to isolate us completely. We could end up alone again, cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Danny shook his head. So your solution is to just accept the lie? To let aliens treat us like we're contaminated and pretend everything is fine? I didn't say it was a good solution, Lisa replied. I said I've been trying to figure out what to do. And now you 3 have forced my hand. Once you access those files, you left traces. The Council will know someone has been looking into classified information. We have maybe a day or two before they come asking questions. Then we need to move fast, Jake said. We need to bring this to Earth's government, to the human delegation at the council. Let them decide how to handle it. Lisa nodded slowly. All right, I'll contact Ambassador Karen White. She deserves to know the truth. But Jake, I want you to understand something. Once we open this door, we can't close it again. The galaxy is about to change, and we have no idea if it will be for better or worse. Within hours, the news was spreading through human space like wildfire. Ambassador White called an emergency session of Earth's government, and Jake's report was presented to the world's leaders. The reaction was exactly what Lisa had predicted: shock, anger, and a feeling of deep betrayal. Politicians gave speeches denouncing the council's secrecy. News broadcasts showed angry crowds demanding answers. Some people called for humanity to leave the Galactic Council entirely. Others wanted stricter measures, arguing that if aliens saw humans as dangerous, then humans should use that fear to their advantage. Aboard the Horizon's Edge, tensions were rising too. The human crew members felt hurt and deceived. The alien crew members felt caught in the middle, bound by a directive they hadn't created but forced to follow. Arguments broke out in the corridors and mess halls. People who had been friends for years suddenly couldn't look at each other. Jake found Crixtal in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. The Velthari's antennae were drooping, a sign of sadness that Jake had learned to recognize. I am sorry, Crixtal said without turning around. I should have told you sooner. I have carried this secret for 2 years, and it has felt like poison inside me. You were following your orders, Jake said, moving to stand beside his friend. I understand that. But Crixtal, I need to ask you something. Why did you tell me? You said you were violating a directive. You could get in serious trouble for what you did. Crixtal's mandibles clicked softly. Do you know what friendship means to my people, Captain? It is not just words or shared experiences. It is physical connection. When a Velthari meets someone they care about, they touch antennae. It is how we share emotions, how we truly know each other. For 2 years I have worked beside you. I have respected your decisions. I have trusted you with my life. By any measure of my culture, you are my friend. But I have never been able to express that in the way that matters most to me. The alien turned to face Jake, and there was genuine pain in his posture. So I ask you now, and I ask with sadness. Why are we barred from touching humans? Is it truly because you are dangerous? Or is it because the council is afraid of something they don't understand? Jake didn't have an answer. He wanted to say that humans weren't dangerous, that the whole thing was a misunderstanding. But the evidence was there in the historical records. The Korath had died. Billions of them had died from diseases that humans carried without even knowing. I don't know, Jake admitted, but I'm going to find out. There has to be a way to make this right. The emergency council session was called 3 days later. Representatives from every member species gathered in the Great Chamber on Kepler Station. Jake was there as a witness, along with Lisa and several other human officers. The council chamber was enormous, with seating arranged in concentric circles that allowed every species to see and be seen. The head of the council was a being called Elder Vorn, a member of the ancient Meridian species. The Meridians were energy beings existing as patterns of light and thought rather than physical matter. They had been part of the council for thousands of years and were respected as wise and impartial. We are here to address the matter of the non-contact protocol, Elder Vorn said, his voice resonating through the chamber in a way that bypassed physical sound. The humans have discovered our directive and have demanded an explanation. We will provide one. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber, showing the same historical records that Jake had found. The assembled representatives watched in silence as the story of the Korath unfolded. Many of them already knew the tale, but seeing it presented so clearly, with all the evidence laid out, made it real in a new way. When the display ended, Elder Vorn spoke again. The non-contact protocol was established to prevent another tragedy. We did not create it out of malice or prejudice. We created it out of fear and grief. The Korath were our friends and allies. Their destruction shocked the entire galaxy. We could not allow such a thing to happen again. Ambassador White stood to address the council. She was a small woman with fierce eyes and a voice that carried authority. We understand the history. We understand your fear. But you should have told us. You should have been honest from the beginning. Instead, you let us join your council while secretly treating us like we were contaminated. Do you have any idea how that makes us feel? We feared how you would react, said a representative of the Lumini, her light pulsing with what Jake's translator indicated was remorse. We thought it would be easier if you simply didn't know. We hoped that in time, perhaps centuries, the directive could be quietly forgotten. But that was wrong, Danny Lee called out from the human section. He stood up, his voice shaking with emotion. You made a decision about us without including us. You treated us like children who couldn't handle the truth. And now that truth is out, and it's causing exactly the kind of division you were trying to avoid. The chamber erupted into debate. Representatives from different species argued back and forth about whether the directive should be maintained or repealed. Some argued that the danger was still real, that modern medicine might not be enough to protect against human microbes. Others said that the directive was based on outdated fear, and that it was time to move forward. Jake listened to the arguments, feeling more and more frustrated. They were talking about humans like they were a problem to be solved, a danger to be managed. No one was asking what humans wanted. No one was considering what this directive had cost in terms of genuine connection and understanding. Finally, he couldn't stay silent anymore. He stood up, and to his surprise, the chamber fell quiet. All eyes turned to him. You're asking the wrong question, Jake said, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. You're debating whether it's safe to touch us, whether the risk is acceptable. But you should be asking why touch matters in the first place. Why is physical contact so important that its absence has caused so much pain? He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes and various sensory organs of beings from a dozen different worlds. Krikstal told me that in his culture, friends touch antennae to share emotions. That without that connection, friendship is incomplete. I'm willing to bet that most of your species have similar customs. Physical contact is how you express trust, affection, and genuine connection. By barring that contact with humans, you haven't just protected yourselves from disease. You've made it impossible to truly accept us as equals. The chamber was silent. Then Krikstal stood up, his chitinous form clicking as he rose. The captain is correct. I have served with humans for 2 years. I have called them friends. But I have never truly known them because the directive stands between us like a wall. I ask the council. The council chamber buzzed with quiet conversation as they waited for the scientific testimony to begin. Jake sat in the human section, feeling the weight of thousands of eyes and other sensory organs focused on the center of the room, where a single figure now stood. Dr. Helen Price was Earth's leading expert on xenobiology, the science of alien life. She was a tall woman in her 40s with dark skin and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She had been working with alien biology since the first contact, trying to understand how human and alien life could safely interact. Thank you for allowing me to speak, Helen said, her voice calm and professional. She activated a holographic display that showed complex biological diagrams. I have spent the last 3 years studying the question of human and alien interaction. I have examined the historical data on the Korath incident, and I have conducted extensive research on human microbiology and its potential effects on alien species. What I have found will surprise many of you. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the translation devices seemed to hold their breath. First, let me confirm what the historical records show. Yes, the Korath died from exposure to Earth's bacteria. Yes, human beings carry an extraordinary diversity of microorganisms. Earth is what we call a high-pressure evolutionary environment, meaning that life there has faced constant challenges and competition. This has resulted in microbes that are remarkably adaptable and resilient. Murmurs ran through the chamber. Some representatives shifted nervously in their seats, but Helen held up her hand for silence. However, the conclusion that the council drew from the Korath incident was based on incomplete data. You assumed that human contact was inherently deadly. You assumed that any species touching a human would face the same fate as the Korath. That assumption was wrong. The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives called out questions, demanded explanations, argued with each other. Elder Vorn had to pulse his light several times to restore order. Please explain. Dr. Price, the elder said once the chamber had quieted. Helen changed the holographic display to show a detailed analysis of Korath biology. The Korath Empire had existed for thousands of years. During that time, they had engaged in extensive genetic engineering. They modified themselves to be stronger, faster, and more resistant to injury. They eliminated genetic variations that they saw as weaknesses. By the time they encountered Earth, the Korath population had very little genetic diversity. She paused, making sure everyone understood. Genetic diversity is not just about appearance or individual traits. It's also about immune system flexibility. When a population has high genetic diversity, different individuals will respond differently to new diseases. Some will be resistant, some will be vulnerable, but the population as a whole survives. The Korath had eliminated that safety net. Amy leaned forward in her seat, listening intently. She was beginning to understand where Helen was going with this. The Korath immune systems were optimized for known threats. Helen continued. They could handle anything they had encountered before with remarkable efficiency, but they had lost the ability to adapt to completely new challenges. When they met Earth's bacteria, organisms that had evolved in one of the most competitive environments in the galaxy, their immune systems simply couldn't respond. It wasn't that human bacteria were a superweapon, it was that Korath biology had become too rigid. Krixtal stood up in the Veltari section. Are you saying the Korath's death was their own fault? I'm saying it was a tragic combination of factors, Helen replied carefully. The Korath made themselves vulnerable through their genetic modifications. Earth's bacteria were well adapted and aggressive, and the Korath's first response, the orbital bombardment, actually made things worse by driving humans to desperate measures. If the Korath had approached the situation differently, with proper quarantine and medical study, the outcome might have been very different. She changed the display again, this time showing data from her own research. I have conducted controlled exposure tests with volunteers from several different species. With proper medical preparation, including vaccination, immune system boosting, and careful monitoring, contact with humans is completely safe. In fact, some species show improved immune function after controlled exposure to Earth's microbes. That's impossible, said a representative of the Thorians, the bear-like species. We have always been taught that humans are dangerous. You have been taught based on 847-year-old data and fear, Helen said bluntly. Medical science has advanced enormously since the Korath incident. We now have the technology to map immune systems, to predict responses to foreign organisms, and to prepare defenses before exposure. The danger that once existed has been largely eliminated. Elder Vorn's light pulsed in a pattern that Jake's translator said indicated deep thought. If what you say is true, Dr. Price, then why has the Council not discovered this themselves? We have brilliant scientists among all our species. Because you never tried, Helen said simply. The non-contact protocol prevented any real research. You were so afraid of repeating the Korath tragedy that you never questioned whether the danger still existed. Fear became policy, and policy became unquestionable tradition. She looked around the chamber, meeting the gazes of as many representatives as she could. I am not saying there is no risk. Any interaction between different biological systems carries some level of risk. But with proper precautions, that risk is minimal, certainly far less than the cost of maintaining barriers between our species. A Lumini representative floated forward, her light flickering with uncertainty. But what of the incident at the reception? When I accidentally touched the human female, I felt pain. I felt my systems disrupting. Amy stood up, her face flushed with emotion. That was panic, not injury. When you touched me, you were terrified because of what you had been taught. Your body responded to your fear, not to any actual danger. Dr. Price examined both of us afterward. There was no biological harm to either of us. Helen nodded. The psychological component of this issue cannot be ignored. Generations of your species have been taught that human contact means death. That fear is deeply ingrained. Even if we prove that physical contact is safe, many individuals will struggle to overcome that learned terror. The debate continued for hours. Scientists from different species presented their own research, some supporting Helen's conclusions and others questioning them. Medical experts discussed protocols for safe contact. Historians examined the Korath incident from new angles, trying to understand what really happened all those centuries ago. Finally, Elder Vorn called for order. We have heard much today. The Council must now decide. Should the non-contact protocol be repealed? Should we allow physical interaction between humans and other species? The vote was called. Each species had one vote, and the decision required a 2/3 majority to pass. Jake watched tensely as the votes were tallied on the holographic display. The result came in. The measure failed. By a narrow margin, the Council voted to maintain the non-contact protocol. Jake felt his heart sink. Around him, the other humans showed various reactions. Some looked angry, others defeated. Ambassador White's face was carefully neutral, but her hands were clenched into fists. Elder Vorn addressed the chamber. The Council has decided that while Dr. Price's research is compelling, we cannot risk another tragedy. The non-contact protocol will remain in effect. However, we will establish a research program to further study the question of human and alien interaction. Perhaps in time, when we have more data, we can revisit this decision. In time, Jake muttered bitterly, which means never. Crixtel appeared beside him, his antennae drooping with sadness. I am sorry, Captain. I had hoped for a different outcome. So did I, Jake said quietly. They stood there together, close but not touching, separated by an invisible wall that seemed more solid than ever. As the council session ended and representatives began to leave, Jake noticed something. Small groups of aliens were gathering, talking in hushed voices. They looked troubled, uncertain. The vote might have gone one way, but it was clear that not everyone was satisfied with the decision. Lisa Grant came over to the human group. That could have gone better, she said. But at least the truth is out now. Everyone knows about the directive. That's something. It's not enough, Amy said, her voice tight with frustration. We proved that contact is safe. We showed them the science. And they still voted to keep us isolated. They voted out of fear, Helen said thoughtfully. But fear can change. Give it time. How much time? Danny asked. Another 847 years? No one had an answer to that. They filed out of the chamber, leaving behind the grand space where humanity's hopes for true acceptance had been denied. Jake looked back once, seeing the empty seats where representatives had voted to keep humans at arm's length. But as he turned to leave, he saw Crixtel still standing there, staring at the spot where they had presented their case. The Velthari's posture showed something that Jake hadn't seen before. It wasn't sadness or defeat, it was determination. 3 days passed after the council vote, and Jake Morrison felt like he was watching his crew fall apart. The humans were angry and hurt. The aliens were confused and guilty. People who had worked together for years now avoided each other in the corridors. The mess hall, once filled with laughter and conversation, had become divided, with humans sitting on one side and aliens on the other. Jake was in his quarters, trying to write a report that made sense of the situation, when his door chimed. Come in, he called, expecting Amy or Danny. Instead, Crixtel entered, and he wasn't alone. Behind him came 6 other alien crew members, 2 Lumini, a Thorian, a Selkie, and a mobile water tank, and 2 beings from species Jake didn't immediately recognize. Captain, Crixtel said, his voice unusually formal, we have been talking, all of us. Not just your crew, but aliens serving on human ships across the fleet. We have been communicating through secure channels, sharing our thoughts about the Council's decision. Jake stood up, suddenly alert. What kind of thoughts? One of the Lumini floated forward, her light pulsing with what Jake had learned meant determination. We believe the Council is wrong. Dr. Price proved that contact is safe with proper medical preparation. The vote was not about science. It was about fear. The Council has the right to make decisions, Jake said carefully, even ones we don't agree with. They have the right to make policy for their governments. The Thorian rumbled, his voice deep as thunder. But they do not have the right to make decisions for individuals. We are not asking for permission to touch humans. We are informing you that we intend to do so, and we accept the consequences. Jake felt his pulse quicken. What are you saying? Crixtel stepped forward, his antennae held high in a gesture of resolve. We are saying that we choose friendship over fear. The Council can enforce their directive on member governments, on official policy, on diplomatic functions. But they cannot control what individuals do in their personal lives. If I wish to touch my friend, if I wish to finally express what I have felt for 2 years, the Council has no authority to stop me. But the directive, Jake started, is a guideline for governments, not a law for people, the Selkie said, her melodious voice filling the room even through the translator. We have consulted with legal experts. As individuals, we have the right to make our own medical decisions. If we choose to undergo Dr. Price's treatment protocol and then make physical contact with humans, we are breaking no laws. We are simply choosing to accept a small risk in exchange for genuine connection. Jake looked at each of them, seeing the determination in their various forms of expression. You realize this could cause problems. The Council won't be happy. Let them be unhappy, Crixtel said firmly. They had 847 years to study this question. They chose fear over knowledge. We are choosing differently. Over the next week, a movement began. It started small, with just the crew of the Horizon's Edge. Dr. Helen Price, who had joined the ship as its chief medical officer, established a treatment protocol. Aliens who wanted to participate underwent a series of vaccinations and immune system treatments. The process took 3 days and involved careful monitoring to ensure safety. Krixtal was the first to complete the treatment. Jake met him in the medical bay on the 4th day with Amy, Danny, and Helen present as witnesses. "Are you sure about this?" Jake asked his friend. "You don't have to do this for me." "I am not doing this for you," Krixtal replied. "I am doing this for us. For 2 years I have called you my friend, but I have never truly expressed it in the way my people have done for thousands of generations. Today that changes." Helen checked her medical scanner one last time. "All readings are normal. There is no medical reason to delay." Jake extended his hand, the simple human gesture of greeting and friendship that had been denied for so long. His heart was pounding. Despite all the science, despite all the assurances, there was still a small voice of fear in the back of his mind. Krixtal looked at the offered hand for a long moment. Then he reached out with his chitinous 3-fingered limb and clasped it. The contact was strange. Krixtal's exoskeleton was smooth and cool, nothing like human skin, but there was warmth beneath it and strength and something that transcended physical sensation. They stood there, hands clasped, and Jake felt something shift between them. The invisible wall that had always been there was gone. "Hello, my friend," Krixtal said softly. "It is good to finally meet you properly." Jake felt his eyes getting wet. He blinked back tears and smiled. "Hello, Krixtal. It's good to meet you too." Helen monitored them both for the next hour. There were no adverse reactions, no signs of infection or immune response. The touch that the galaxy had feared for nearly 1,000 years proved to be exactly what Dr. Price had promised. Completely safe. Word spread quickly. More aliens from the Horizon's Edge volunteered for the treatment. Then requests started coming in from other ships, from stations, from aliens serving alongside humans throughout human space. Dr. Price trained other medical personnel in the protocol, and treatment centers were established on every major human facility. The movement had a name now. People were calling it the Contact Initiative. It was voluntary, completely based on individual choice. No one was forced or even pressured to participate. But for those who did, it opened up possibilities that had been closed for centuries. Jake watched the changes ripple through his crew. The Lumini who had recoiled from Amy at the reception now floated beside her in the mess hall, their lights intertwining in patterns that expressed friendship. The Thorian crew members participated in physical training exercises with the humans, spotting each other on weights and sharing the kind of rough camaraderie that their warrior culture valued. The Selkies, limited by their need for water, still found ways to make contact, extending manipulators from their tanks to shake hands or pat shoulders. The Galactic Council was not pleased. They issued statements condemning the Contact Initiative as reckless and dangerous. Some conservative factions called for sanctions against humans, but they couldn't actually do anything about it. The participating aliens were breaking no laws, just ignoring guidelines. And as weeks passed with no incidents, no outbreaks, no deaths, their arguments rang increasingly hollow. 6 months after the council vote, Jake stood on the observation deck of Kepler Station. The view was the same as always, ships from 100 worlds coming and going in the eternal dance of galactic commerce. But something fundamental had changed. Krixtal stood beside him, and for the first time the Velthari's hand rested comfortably on Jake's shoulder. It was a small gesture, barely noticeable to anyone who didn't know the history. But to Jake, it meant everything. Amy joined them, bringing Danny with her. Then came Helen, and Lieutenant Chris Boyer from engineering, and Commander Patricia Lynn, who had just transferred from another ship. Slowly, the observation deck filled with people, human and alien, standing together without the invisible barriers that had separated them for so long. "Do you think the Council will ever officially repeal the directive?" Amy asked, watching a Velthari cargo ship dock at the nearby bay. "Eventually," Lisa Grant said, appearing from behind them. The station commander had been one of the strongest supporters of the Contact Initiative. The numbers speak for themselves. Over 1 million aliens have participated in the initiative now. Not a single serious incident. The council can maintain their official position all they want, but reality is making it irrelevant. How long do you think it will take? Danny asked. Lisa shrugged. Years, probably. Decades, maybe. Governments are slow to change, especially when they have to admit they were wrong. But it doesn't matter. The important change has already happened. She gestured at the station beyond the windows. Look out there. On every ship, in every station, in every colony, humans and aliens are working together without barriers. They're touching, embracing, expressing friendship and trust in ways that were forbidden for nearly 1,000 years. The Council can keep their directive if they want. The galaxy has already moved on. Jake thought about the journey that had brought them here. It had started with a simple question, asked with sadness by a friend who wanted to know why connection was forbidden. It had led to the discovery of an ancient tragedy, to political battles and scientific debates, to a vote that seemed to close the door on hope. But then individuals had made a different choice. They had decided that connection mattered more than rules, that friendship was worth the risk, that the walls between species were meant to be climbed. Not accepted, Crystal, Jake said, turning to his friend. Do you remember when you asked me why you were barred from touching humans? The Velthari's antennae twitched in what Jake now knew was amusement. I remember. It seems like a long time ago. You asked why we were barred from touching humans, Jake said. Past tense. Like it was something that couldn't be changed. But you changed it. All of you did. You refused to accept fear as the final answer. We had human friends worth fighting for, Crixtal replied simply. The Council gave us a directive. You gave us hope. The choice was easy. They stood together, watching the stars, human and alien side by side. Somewhere out there on thousands of worlds, other people were making the same choice. Station by station, ship by ship, friendship by